When humanity faces monsters, the greatest threats don't always come from fangs or claws. Sometimes humanity itself is the danger. Monster Hunter Wilds takes this idea further than ever, turning what should be a simple quest to reunite a lost boy with his family into a harrowing odyssey punctuated by disaster, ambition, and human interference. From the vast, sweeping windward plains to the crumbling ruins of Wyveria, we hunters are left with one lingering question: what happens when humanity decides to play God? The Monster Hunter series has always explored the struggle between man and nature, often in the form of monsters. Sometimes it's a battle for survival, and other times it's a fight for control. We've seen this in Monster Hunter 4U's desperate clash with Fatalis, in World's pursuit of Safi'jiiva, and in Rise's fight to save Kamura from Magnamalo's wrath in the chaos of the Rampage. But Wilds takes this conflict to its breaking point, shifting the question from "can we fight against nature?" to "should we?" In this video, we'll analyze how the Monster Hunter series has long explored humanity's intrinsic and complicated relationship with the wild, the unknown, and the untamed. Later, we'll discuss how Wilds forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew about humanity's place in the world of monsters. At its core, Monster Hunter has always been a story about balance. The often delicate coexistence between humanity and nature. Monsters and humans are not allies, but neither are they enemies. The relationship is more akin to that of begrudging neighbors, bound by necessity rather than allyship or choice. While some creatures are outright catastrophic, most are simply part of the ecosystem, and survival in this world demands some degree of cooperation. Some monsters, like the cow-like docile Aptonoths, live alongside humans, grazing peacefully in farmlands and raised for their meat. But when the larger, more destructive beasts emerge, threatening not just villages but entire ways of life, balance shifts, and that's where we, the hunters, come in. Hunters are tasked with maintaining that balance between peaceful coexistence and utter annihilation of mankind. But survival isn't always the only motive. The Hunting Guild, humanity's self-appointed mediator between species, decrees when and why a hunt must occur. On the surface, its role appears noble, to ensure humanity and monsters can continue to coexist. The guild preaches about preservation, claiming to only sanction hunts when completely necessary. But in practice, the line between necessity and exploitation is a bit blurred. Hunters aren't only summoned to eliminate community or world-ending threats, they're frequently sent out on missions that serve no purpose beyond human desire. Take one of Monster Hunter Rise's Mizutsune quests, for example. The request reads, "Oh, how elegantly the Mizutsune steps, arcing through the air. It must be the fin. If I had one for my own, surely I could dance as it does too. I know, Hunter, waltz with the wyvern, and I shall seize its fin." The requester, mesmerized by Mizutsune's graceful movements, wants its fin, not for research or protection, but simply to improve their own dancing. And despite Mizutsune being a largely docile creature, only attacking when provoked or during mating season, the guild for some reason approves this request. A similar example can be found in Monster Hunter World, where we're sent to murder the Kulu-Ya-Ku for its simple crime of stealing supplies. Perhaps I wouldn't be offended if Kulu-Ya-Ku wasn't the cutest little egg-stealing raptor to ever grace the planet. On the surface, this request makes sense. Supplies are critical for establishing themselves in the new world, and having them stolen could be dangerous. But when you consider how often hunters are sent to steal wyvern eggs from unsuspecting monsters, the hypocrisy is clear. It begs the question, how does the guild decide which hunts serve the greater good or are merely for human convenience? This contradiction becomes even more apparent when we take a look at Elder Dragons. In the earlier games, these creatures weren't just powerful, they were practically mythical. They blurred the line between legend and reality, and they were treated not only as apocalyptic forces, but most likely as divine beings. Take Fatalis as an example. It is one of the most feared creatures in the entire series. It's a living catastrophe that single-handedly reduced Castle Shroud to ruins and started living on the ashes of the civilization. Its hatred for humanity runs so deep that it literally molds its slain victims to its skin, similar to how hunters use monster parts for armor. According to legend, its breath can turn entire civilizations to ash in an instant, and its very presence is marked by violent and sudden natural disasters. It is easy to imagine ancient humans worshipping it as a god, offering prayer not only in hopes of salvation, but in fear of its wrath. Then there's Dalamudar, the massive serpent from Monster Hunter 4. This creature is so large that its body is the battlefield, and a juvenile skeleton even makes up the rotten Valen world. It draws clear inspiration from Jormungandr, the world serpent of Norse mythology. Jormungandr is an Ouroboros-like giant snake being said to encircle the world while in a deep sleep. It's rumored that its awakening would bring about Ragnarok, or the apocalypse. Like its mythological counterpart, Dalamudar represents an apocalyptic force to the people of the Monster Hunter world. Its hunt is framed as not mere survival, but as a necessary act to preserve life and prevent catastrophe. These examples reveal humanity's paradoxical relationship with monsters. It is easier for them to coexist with them, particularly ones like Aptonoth or Mizutsune, who don't pose a significant threat to human existence. On one hand, though, we have these creatures, and on the other, we have ones like Fatalis and Dalamudar, who pose undeniable threats not only to humans but to entire ecosystems or the entire world. Hunting them is an act of preservation, not self-defense. Additionally, the world of Monster Hunter is fundamentally hostile to human life. Many monsters, such as Raytheon and Rathalos, attack anything that enters their territory, whether monster or human. In many cases, humans are forced to fight back, despite there being many hunts which could be considered frivolous. At times, hunting is even portrayed as an act of mercy. Take Malzeno and its variant, Primordial Malzeno. These creatures are majestic, old beings, but they suffer from curios affliction that ultimately makes their continued existence painful and dangerous. As hunters, we don't just slay them, we put them to rest, finally ending their suffering. This again complicates the morality of hunting. It's not always about conquest, sometimes it's about knowing that there is no better option. Despite their terrifying presence, however, elder dragons are not merely chaotic forces of nature, they are deeply intertwined with the natural world, even serving as reflections of the natural world itself. Some of them have essential ecological roles that could be dangerous to interrupt. For example, Kirin is a lightning-infused pseudo-unicorn elder dragon inspired by the Qilin of Chinese mythology. It is always accompanied by a storm, much like how Fatalis' awakening is linked to natural disasters. However, unlike Fatalis, Kirin is not an inherently malevolent monster, and its storms serve important environmental functions. The heavy rains help rehydrate the land, replenishing dry soil and sustaining plant life. Additionally, storms release built-up atmospheric energy, regulating temperatures and preventing extreme climate shifts. Of course, Kirin's presence isn't without danger. Storms like these often come with intense lightning, powerful winds, hail, and even the threat of tornadoes. But just as real-world natural disasters have their benefits despite their destructive capabilities, Kirin's storms help to maintain the delicate ecological balance. Other elder dragons have similarly complex relationships with the world around them. Kushala Daora, the steel dragon, is infamous for its powerful windstorms, but those winds serve to disperse seeds, shape landscapes, and even regulate local climates. Ciadius, the Leviathan-like marine elder dragon, is tied to the ocean's depths, and its movements influence ocean currents and sometimes cause earthquakes, similar to how whales in our universe contribute to marine ecosystems. Even Velkhana, an ice elder dragon, can provide natural benefits to the environment, such as redistributing water and helping regulate temperatures. Elder dragons are often portrayed as extensions of nature itself, embodying the raw power of the elements in ways that make them seem almost divine or mystical. This naturally creates a situation where humanity is in direct opposition to them, and by extension nature itself, setting up the central man versus nature conflict so present in all Monster Hunter games. We do not merely slay creatures, we are engaging in an ongoing struggle for survival against forces that have shaped the world since the dawn of its creation. But this dynamic raises an important question: is our interference helping or making things worse? Consider Kushala Daora again. Left undisturbed in its nesting grounds, it is unlikely to generate the same intense, destructive windstorms that make it so feared. But when threatened by a hunter or another large monster, it has no choice but to unleash its full power, creating the very devastation we sought to prevent. This reaction mirrors real-world animal behavior. When cornered, most animals become aggressive and will fight tooth and claw for survival. Hunting elder dragons, then, may not exactly be a necessity, but rather a self-fulfilling cycle of conflict where the more we challenge nature, the more it pushes back. Beyond immediate danger, there's the question of long-term ecological consequences. Many of the natural disasters caused by elder dragons have beneficial side effects even though they're catastrophic in the short term. Teostra's and Lunostra's wildfires clear out dead vegetation, making room for new growth and even helping to spread certain plant species' seeds. Similar to how some real-world trees, such as the giant sequoia, rely on fires to reproduce. Kushala Daora and Kirin's storms regulate moisture levels, preventing droughts and maintaining the health of ecosystems. Even Dire Morales' volcanic eruptions contribute to the environment by creating new land masses and enriching soil, creating fertile ground. It's of course understandable why humanity fights back against these destructive forces. As someone with severe storm anxiety, I definitely understand the urge to walk outside and shake my fists at the sky sometimes. The reality is, though, that we can't and shouldn't try to fight nature. We can't slay a volcano in the same way our hunter can slay a Zora Magdaros. Even if we could, doing so might have unintended consequences that ripple through ecosystems in ways we can't predict. That's not to say that we should welcome destruction or go walk out into a tornado or that hunters should give up fighting, but we have to acknowledge that these forces serve a specific purpose and exist for a reason. They are part of a balance that predates us and will probably outlive us. Older Monster Hunter games delicately balanced respect for nature with the hunter's role in it in a way that newer games haven't quite hammered out yet. In Wilds, for example, there's a running gag where our handler Alma hastily declares that the guild has authorized a hunt. She essentially speaks on the guild's behalf, granting immediate approval for whatever hunt we take on. This isn't how it normally works, but I get that it keeps the gameplay flow smooth, especially in a more open world one. Still, it creates an interesting dynamic, one where the guild seems increasingly lax in its standards for hunts. Whether this is just a tongue-in-cheek joke or a sign of something more is unclear, but if Wilds indicates that Capcom is taking Monster Hunter narratives more seriously, then I think it could make for an interesting plot point in the future. But what is causing this shift in universe? In older games, monsters weren't just obstacles to be taken down, they were terrifying unknowable forces. You can see this reflected in the tones of old quest descriptions, which often conveyed deep fear and an almost inherent trauma of existing in the universe. Compare two different quest descriptions for Gore Magala hunts. In Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, the quest states, Gore Magala, its name sends grown men running for their mothers. Don't expect a cheery hunt with this one, its black mist swallows all. Can you drive away this relentless evil? This frames Gore Magala as a frightening apocalyptic force, something people fear because they've seen what it can do. They respect it. It's labeled as evil because it terrifies people. Now contrast that with the Gore Magala quest description in Monster Hunter Rise. Beneath the azure skies of the Citadel lurks a mysterious monster cloaked in black. Writhing in pain, it glares from unseen eyes. The hunter or the hunted, which will you be? It's well written, of course, but the tone has taken a complete 180. It's dramatic rather than reverent and poetic where it used to be fearful. It tells us nothing about how Gore Magala fits into the universe, just that this is a dangerous encounter. What I'm getting at is that humans in the Monster Hunter world seem to have more respect for monsters in the older games than they do now, and Alma's running gag could certainly be read as a nod towards that. Why that shift has happened, I don't know. Maybe it's because humans now have a better understanding of monsters, leading to less fear. Maybe in the earlier games, elder dragons and dangerous monsters represented something untamable that humans hadn't adapted to yet. But now, maybe humanity has expanded enough, built up enough information and infrastructure, and hunted enough monsters that they no longer seem like major threats. It's interesting to see how this tone shift has evolved and to wonder how it might evolve in the future. I know these games aren't the most narrative-driven ones, but Wilds makes me think it's heading in that direction at least a little. If that's the case, I hope we get more hints as to what this shift means. This feels like a natural place to pivot to talking about Wilds. What I've been building up to is the idea that human intervention in the monster world and nature tends to lead to larger catastrophes. Wilds reinforces and even directly addresses this concept more than ever. In Wilds, we follow our hunter as they, alongside the guild, attempt to help a young boy named Nata reunite with his family and village after being forced to flee from an apex predator, Guardian Arkfeld. I really enjoyed the story in this game. For the first time ever, I actually paid attention to a Monster Hunter narrative, and I don't regret it at all. I easily connected with Alma, Gemma, Olivia, Alma, Nata, Alma, Isai, and even Fabius. That said, fair warning, this section of the video will contain spoilers for the story of the game. I'll be discussing some of the story's major themes and how they fit into the game's and the universe's broader narrative. Wilds introduces two new concepts, Guardian Monsters and the Dragon Torch. Before breaking down what they are, I need to explain how they came to exist, because wow, it's a lot. When Nata finally reunites with his village, we learn that the people he calls the Keepers are actually descendants of the original inhabitants of an ancient city called Wyveria. If you're a longtime Monster Hunter fan, that name should ring some bells. Whether Wyveria is directly connected to Wyverians is unclear to me, but given the name, it's reasonable to assume Wyverians founded it, though the Keepers themselves appear to be mostly human. Wyveria was destroyed long ago by an elder dragon named Zoshia. This event is crucial to understanding the existence of guardian monsters, and more specifically the significance of Nata and its flagship monster Arkveld. To keep things clear, I'll refer to the ancient inhabitants of Wyveria as Wyverians and their modern descendants as Keepers. The story from this point on is wild, no pun intended. For reasons that are never fully explained but probably boiled down to power and control, the Wyverians attempted to create artificial life. They engineered monsters who couldn't eat or reproduce, sustaining them instead with a substance called wyvern milk or wilk. These creatures were known as guardians since their sole purpose was probably to guard Wyveria. There is, I believe, some sort of monster-human war that happened around the same time, leading to the destruction of Wyveria, though I'll cover that a bit more later. This also led to the Guardians being decommissioned. Those who were left behind from the destruction of the civilization, known as the Keepers, sealed the Guardians away in cocoons, leaving them in stasis like discarded experiments. When Nata learns this, he very reasonably says, "Life, is that what you call this? Constructed husks that can't even eat? Locked away until they're no longer needed? Arkveld, all it wanted was to be free." Okay, it's pretty melodramatic, but he's just a kid, give him a break. This is also a parallel and connected to some of Nata's story, but it is a parallel for how Nata views the Keepers as imprisoned by their own role in keeping the Guardians locked up. It's a powerful moment regardless, and serves to cement how messed up it is that the Guardians were forced to exist like they did. This ties into Arkveld itself, as it is basically the Guardian monster, the one who destroyed the Keeper's settlement at the start of the game, but it represents the bigger question the game is playing around with: can you overcome nature? For Arkveld, this revolves around overcoming its limitations from its Guardian status, as well as whether it can or cannot overcome the issues inflicted on it once it does. Arkveld as the flagship monster is deeply tied to Wild's narrative. It was originally an extinct species that the Wyverians sought to preserve, recreating it as a guardian so it wouldn't die. But like all guardians, it was dependent on Wilk for sustenance and eventually locked away like all the others. As the monster who kicked off the plot of the game by forcing Nata to flee and find the hunters, Arkveld is extremely plot relevant and shows up many times throughout the game. Over the course of the story, however, Nata begins to see himself in Arkveld. To be quite honest, it reads as projection from Nata, who I'm guessing has a lot of trauma from the things that have happened to him. In essence, however, Nata feels trapped in a similar way that Arkveld was. Arkveld was trapped by its unnatural existence, and Nata by his role in a society he's growing to disagree with. But while most Guardians are bound by their biological limitations, Arkveld does something unprecedented. It breaks its metaphorical chains and learns to eat real food. For the first time, it no longer needs Wilk to survive. And as you might expect, this goes horribly wrong. Without a natural way to regulate its intake, Arkveld spirals into an uncontrollable hunger, massacring everything in its path like some horrifying fusion of Gormagala and Deviljho. It disrupts entire ecosystems, overwhelmed by its need to consume. Eventually, the destruction becomes too great to ignore, as it would threaten the ability for other ecosystems to continue functioning, and Alma authorizes us to kill it. Despite his deep emotional connection to Arkveld, even Nata realizes there's no other choice. He's extremely devastated, yes, but he gives his approval with very little fight. And with that, because it is a Monster Hunter game, Arkveld is dead. Pivoting real fast to another monster because it fits narratively with Arkveld. This isn't a Guardian, but sort of adjacent to the Guardians, Jin Dahad. In this section, I'd like to go over the apexes and how they fit into the universe and with one another. Jin Dahad is a massive living barrier between the hunter and their journey from the ruins of Wyveria to Suja, a city full of Wyverians that live on a very remote, very beautiful mountain. As the hunter and their party leap across floating ice chunks, Jin Dahad moves deliberately through the terrain, walking on walls by using his feet to create ice he can walk on and stalking the prey. It isn't just an environmental threat, it's actively trying to stop people from crossing. Jin Dahad stands out to me because it's not the typical apex. For one, it's much larger than the others, and its sheer size demands its own dedicated arena to fight him in. This is a huge contrast to the others who all roam free within their respective biomes. Each of these apexes is tied to a specific biome and natural disaster. Rey Dao of the Windward Plains represents thunderstorms and dust storms. Uth Duna of the Scarlet Forest embodies hurricanes, and New Udra of the Oil Well Basin mirrors wildfires and volcanic eruptions. These associations aren't just thematic, they also tie into the unique terrain and atmospheric mechanics of each region. The Windward Plains experience severe storms during sandtide, the Scarlet Forest grows unstable and rainy during inclemency, and the Oil Well Basin literally heats up during fire spring. Jin Dahad is similar to these, likely representing blizzards. Its massive ice attacks and the frigid biome it dominates makes that connection only natural. But why, if Jin Dahad follows the same pattern, does it feel so different from the other apexes? It's larger, isolated, and lacks the same free-roaming presence as the others. It feels more like an outlier than a true member of the group. Then there's Arkfeld, who feels like it should be the natural apex of the ruins of Wyveria, but isn't because it doesn't have an apex. Instead, I think Arkfeld isn't just a mere apex, it's the apex. It doesn't simply exist within an ecosystem, it actively consumes it. It feeds on nearly every other monster in the game, including many of the other apexes. While they all seem to represent natural disasters, Arkfeld feels like something bigger, the cycle of nature itself. It even carries the chains it once broke free from, now repurposed into weapons. In that sense, I think it's fitting for Arkfeld to be the apex of apexes because nature itself doesn't bow to natural disasters. The fact that the apexes usually only appear during extreme weather adds another layer of unease to their appearances. Rey Dao's storm siren-like call, cutting through a dust storm with almost no visibility, is chilling not just because of its sound, but because it sends a signal to our brains that something is wrong. The game makes a point of tying these disasters to the apexes in a way that past titles often reserved exclusively for Elder Dragons. Other monsters have been elemental before, of course, but their connections to natural forces were never this pronounced. It almost feels like there's a reason for that. Speaking of Elder Dragons, let's discuss Xochitl. Xochitl is deeply tied to the mystery of the Dragon Torch, and understanding one helps explain the other. Picking up from Guardian Arkfeld's death, it's obvious that's not the end of the story. I mean, the dude didn't even nuke me, of course I was waiting for something stronger. As we discussed, long before the events of Wilds, the Wyverians created the Guardians. And bear with me, because I know I've covered this already, but it's relevant. Designed to be the ultimate protector of Wyveria, Xochitl was meant to serve as a living defense against external threats. But like so many tales of unchecked ambition, the Wyverians underestimated their own creation. During the aforementioned war between Elder Dragons and humanity, Xochitl turned on the Wyverians, ultimately leading to the destruction of Wyveria itself. In response, the Keepers were formed, tasked with containing the beast by sealing it within a cocoon powered by the Dragon Torch. Here's where it gets pretty weird, if it wasn't weird enough for you. The Dragon Torch is described as an artificial construct created by the Wyverians, but it's also implied to be something biological. It can be affected by the Frenzy virus, for example, which suggests it's more than a machine. The game never outright explains what it is, and honestly I think that makes it more unsettling. The Wyverians originally created it to manipulate the environment, controlling weather, gravity, and even the laws of physics, hence the floating ice chunks in ice shard cliffs. But if it was once just a machine, something about it has clearly changed. The ambiguity around its nature and motives, whether it's a construct, a living entity, or something in between, adds to that eerie sense of the Wyverians playing God and losing control of their creations. The real problem begins when the guild realizes that the Dragon Torch is responsible for the strange and volatile climatic and environmental shifts happening throughout the Forbidden Lands. While connected to it, Xochitl has been siphoning its energy, warping the climate, and pushing entire species to adapt to increasingly hostile conditions. With this revelation, the guild decides there are two viable options. 1, destroy the Dragon Torch and obliterate a large part of the Forbidden Lands, or 2, ignore the problem and hope it goes away. Neither of these options are good, obviously, so everyone's kinda depressed. Enter Nata, whose pendant holds an amount of Wilk so substantial that it could destroy the Dragon Torch, and he's willing and ready to use it. Despite knowing it will fundamentally alter life for hundreds of people, if not outright end it, Nata is like, alright, let's do it. We arrive at Xochitl's cocoon, and the hunter comes in, basically like, yeah, that's great little buddy, but how about I just murder that apocalypse beast instead? And because this is Monster Hunter, of course we've gotta hunt that monster, sidestepping irreversible calamity with sheer skill, stubbornness, and some sick moves. Zoshia itself is one of the most fascinating elder dragons in the series, which says something because there are a lot of fascinating elder dragons. Its body is covered in thick layers of wyvern milk, which chip away from your attacks during battle to reveal a dark, featureless form underneath. Its fight is reminiscent of Fatalis, Shara Ishvalda, and Elatrion, using a mix of dragon and fire attacks with moves that directly echo Fatalis' fighting style. Given its origins, I wouldn't be surprised if the Wyverians modeled Zoshia after Fatalis. And thanks to its connection to the Dragon Torch and Wilk, it hits like a freight train. What I find most interesting about Wilds is how aggressively it beats you over the head with the man versus nature theme. The older games had elements of this, of course, monsters existing as forces of nature that hunters had to push back against, but Wilds feels like it's shouting it at you. The apexes are literal natural disasters, the Wyverians meddled in things beyond their control, and their downfall wasn't just bad luck, it was the consequence of trying to harness something they couldn't and shouldn't. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Some of my favorite stories explore this idea with similar bluntness. Watership Down and Yellow Jackets immediately come to mind. But it is cool to see Monster Hunter throw all their cards on the table like that. The unsettling part of the final choice our party faces is that there's no real solution, only two bad options. Either let devastating natural disasters continue unchecked, or risk destroying parts of the Forbidden Lands, the home of our new friends. It drives home just how powerless most humans are in the Monster Hunter universe. Early on, we meet Nona, a young girl from the village of Kunafa, along with her brother Isai and the rest of their community. Unlike hunters, the people of Kunafa don't know how to fight. They rely on protective gems to keep monsters at bay, yet time and time again, those gems fail. Against the forces of nature, they're entirely defenseless. A pack of Doshagamas stormed through the village at one point, leaving destruction in their wake, likely costing lives in the process as well. Throughout the game, the humans have to grapple with the Wyverians' decision. Their attempts to control nature only made things worse, echoing the earlier theme that hunting elder dragons tied to natural disasters might not actually prevent those disasters. But what's the alternative, really? They can't just lie down, give up, and die, so they have to keep fighting, even when they actively make the problems worse. In the end, they're all just people doing their best in a hostile, unforgiving world. And yet, nature finds a way. We may have killed Guardian Arkfeld, but in the final cutscene, Alma, the hunter, and Nata discover a newly hatched Arkfeld egg. The game doesn't tell us if this Arkfeld will come back in some significant way, but considering that many Arkfelds appear in the wild after this point, it's clear the species has found a way to thrive. In a way, it's beautiful, proof that life always endures. Gore Magala and the Frenzy virus make a return in Wilds, which honestly was a little disappointing. I had already spent so much time hunting it in Rise, and here, its narrative impact has little to do with the monster, but just the effects the virus has on the Dragon Torch. It fits thematically with the rest of the game, of course, but I think the themes were pretty strong already. This part of the game honestly frustrated me. I wanted Lagiacrus to show up at literally any point, and it's not about Gore Magala itself, I do love that monster, and Shagaru Magala too, but seriously, after spending hours working through low rank, fixing the Dragon Torch and stabilizing the weather, I finally hit high rank and have to do it all over again. I think I've been lenient on the game because I've genuinely had a blast playing it, but I can't ignore some of the valid critiques I've seen online either. For one, the game does feel too easy. I can't speak on the performance issues people talk about since I'm playing on console and doing fine in that regard, but difficulty-wise? I've carded maybe 3 times, and at least one of those was on purpose because I just didn't want to walk back to camp. And now that I've said it out loud, I just remembered fast travel exists in the game, so whoops. I don't know if this game was deliberately designed to be easier or if I've just played too much of the series by now, but I was expecting some level of a challenge. Literally every fight I walked into going, is this going to be my wall? And every time the answer was no. Low rank felt like a railroaded story mode where I was constantly being funneled from one quest to the next without the freedom to hunt what I wanted or explore where I wanted. And after all that, to have the inclement weather return again as another problem I had to fix felt very repetitive. But I'm not trying to be too hard on this game either. This is the first Monster Hunter game I've pre-ordered, and while it's not perfect, I don't regret it. But there are moments that pull me out of the experience and make me sigh. That said, I'm still excited to grind out gears and awards once I have more time to do so. Despite its flaws, I still get to hunt cool giant monsters, and at the end of the day, that's really all I'm here for. As we've seen throughout the Monster Hunter series, the balance between humanity and nature has always been precarious. Previous games show us that the creatures we hunt aren't just random beasts, they're part of the larger ecosystem, one that we can't control. But Monster Hunter Wilds takes this concept further, making it even more unsettling by showing us the effects these conflicts have on innocent people. We're not simply told that Old Wyverian Man number 2 was attacked by a Rathalos, we're shown it. It's effective in pulling the players into the story. The introduction of the Dragon Torch as well redefines the themes that have long since defined the series. Nature is usually portrayed as something that must be respected, but is now a force that's actively fighting back. The Guardians, once protectors of the Forbidden Lands, are now harbingers of destruction who don't guard anything or anyone besides their precious wyvern milk. The world itself is unraveling as a result of Wyverian influence. That's what sets Wilds apart from its predecessors. It doesn't just depict nature as a powerful force, it leans into the horror of the unknown, turning the world into something unpredictable and borderline sentient. It's a stark reminder, even for us, that we are powerless against the forces of nature. Ultimately, Monster Hunter Wilds isn't just about the hunt. It's a warning to all hunters to be careful while dabbling in things beyond our understanding. I'm curious if future games will expand on this idea or move in a different direction entirely. Imagine if we could play as a hunter in a time where they're doing what the Wyverians did and we suddenly have to stop a world-ending catastrophe that we helped create. I think that would be a fascinating and fun idea for Capcom to explore. But hey, that's enough rambling from me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment with your favorite monster or let me know what you thought of the game. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe for more content. Safe travels, everyone.